You're listening to Gen XP. Let's talk games.
Our apologies, but we had a technical difficulty at the very beginning of Alyn's interview. So what you did not hear was the question which came to him first, which was, tell us your origin story about how you started playing role-playing games in general. This is a question that we had in the other interviews, and we wanted to get everyone's perspective on that. Again, apologies for the technical difficulty, but here's the answer.
So I used to go, I was born in Bolivar, same as you got, where we are now, around here. But then when I was in kindergarten, my family moved to Texas. And my grandparents still lived in Bolivar, so I would fly or get driven to Bolivar every summer. And I would spend a couple months every summer, every year up in Bolivar with my grandparents, and then I'd come home. So one was the summer between my 4th and 5th grade years. So I was 9, I think. I remember getting picked up and taken home from the airport. And when I walked in the kitchen, my mother picked me up, and I walk into the kitchen, and my dad is sitting there with this 2x2 plywood board with a piece of graph paper and glass on top of it. And my brother and his friend are sitting at the table with him, and they were playing a 1st edition module. And I was fascinated. I was like, what are you doing? How do you do it? And that just kicked off role-playing for me.
That was in Texas?
Yep.
So yeah, it's important to note, just to throw this out there, that despite the fact that Alyn was in Bolivar during the summers, this was in the before times, and we did not know each other.
I didn't know. So funny story, actually. With Ryan, I knew both of Ryan's brothers, but I didn't know Ryan existed. And, I knew both of Ryan's brothers for a couple of years, actually, because when I'd come up in the summer, one of them was a lifeguard, one of them was a really good friend of my friend.
We didn't meet until, junior high, did we?
Nope.
Yeah,
but Ryan, I didn't even know existed, because apparently every summer when I came up, Ryan was somewhere else as well. So,
Ryan was probably with me during the summer.
So, that just began my love of role-playing. After that, I actually happened to find a friend in 5th grade who was into it, and I ended up, his brother was into it, and I ended up with a whole box of 1st edition books. He was selling them, or his friend was selling them, I don't remember exactly what, but I was like, what do you want for them? Well, I want all of them, and I still have the books to this day, but that lasted for a few years, and then middle school happened, and in Texas, I really didn't have a group to play with, so I kind of fell off, but I still read books. That's when I read the Dragonlance books, and I read L. Ron Hubbard, Battlefield Earth, because I would read anything that I could get my hands on that had a decent story that was unrealistic, let's say. Not Tolkien. Tolkien just describes too much for me. Sorry, Ryan. We've had this conversation before.
I like details.
Little bit of Anne Rice too, but she's the same as Tolkien for me. Kind of too explanatory.
She's very much into explanation as well.
And until when I was in 8th grade, my parents got divorced, and my dad ended up back here. And when I came back here, I actually found people reading Forgotten Realms books, and that's where I really got back into role-playing. And then I met Ryan and Guy, and...
When you say you found people reading Forgotten, you mean the novels, or do you mean the actual game books?
The novels.
Oh, okay.
The novels.
Gotcha. Cool.
So, what's your favorite genre or setting for storytelling, or RPGs, or any other?
Honestly, I love it all. We never really play futuristic Star Wars type settings. Nobody was ever into it, but when back in the day, I was always pushing to play Spelljammer. I was trying to play Spelljammer because
it doesn't have to be just for RPGs. It can be novels, movies.
I know. But I like it all. I love the future. I read futuristic books one day. Guy, what was the series where they had the swords?
The Dark Sword? No. I don't remember. But it was written by Margaret Weiss, I believe.
But I've read Halo. I didn't mind the Halo books. you know, and then one week I'll decide to go back and do some fantasy or Dresden books.
You've also got some of those 40K novels.
I've read all the Dresden books. I've read 40K novels. I mean, if it's literature, if it's unrealistic, let's go back to Alyn's favorite thing anymore. I'm into it. Now my big thing is honestly Audible. I listen to a book every day.
So basically, screw reality. That's
pretty much. I mean, why not? Isn't that what we're about here?
Absolutely.
I mean, trying to like
absolutely.
And it's not that you know, I keep saying that, but it's not that I'm against reality and that I try and live in an unfantasy, unrealistic world. But that's just my outlet, you know. I love
fiction. It's just
reading and doing things that are storytelling or not, things that you can't do. Like if magic existed, I would love it. You know, if monsters existed, I would love it because it's just insane. It's such a broad category and there's so many different things you can do with it, as opposed to let's just go get on a train and take a train ride and oh wow, look at that tree over there.
We're not bashing any train riders.
Or trees.
Or trees.
Right, or trees.
Love trees.
So, we talked about gaming. You mentioned listening to
Not
books.
a dendrophile, though.
Right. You mentioned listening to books on Audible. So, what would you list as one of your hobbies outside of gaming?
I mean, they're too numerous to count, if I got to be honest with you. So the last round of hobbies was I got big time into Warhammer 40K and Age of Sigmar. I probably painted over the last 3 years between 6,000 and 8,000 points of armies. For my kids, I painted like the leaders for their respective armies, which happened to be Zeech and Seraphon. And then for myself, I painted Ashiarch's Bone Reapers, which were awesome. I painted Nagash, who's definitely one of my favorite models. And then 40K, I painted a whole Eldari army. I've painted some Death. I can't even think of what they're called now. But I've painted a lot of guys. That's been my last hobby. My new hobby, other than starting this with these guys and working on this, is I got a forge for Christmas, a little forge and an anvil, and I'm going to somehow figure out where I can set these up and start blacksmithing if I can find the time in between all my other things, because I've also been playing Diablo 4 and working and, you know, just trying to fill my life with as much stuff as I can.
Lots of hobbies. Lots of hobbies. Cool.
Diablo 4. Do you have a favorite RPG video game?
I don't think I do. To me, I go through phases where I won't even touch a video game. Last few years, like I said, with Warhammer was one of them. I just couldn't do it. I was big time into WoW when it first came out, and I've played video games since Nintendo. I actually still have an original Nintendo Rob the Robot in my attic. So, to me, I like games. I don't dislike games, but they're very repetitive. Go to this guy, get a quest. Oh, it's the quest to go slay this monster. Oh, it's the quest to go find this person. Oh, it's the quest to go find this item. And I go through phases where I just don't feel like doing that anymore. Now, I love RPG games. I've been playing Diablo 4. I've beat all of the Dragon
Age
games. I've beat all of the Commander Shepard. What are those? Mass Effect. There you go. See,
those are RPGs.
I know.
You played Witcher as well, right?
I played Witcher. You know, I like them. Do I have a favorite? No, because to me, at the end of the day, they're the same game with a different skin on them. And I mean, I play them. No, I'm not saying I don't play them and I don't enjoy playing them. I enjoy playing them.
Sacrilege.
You know, it's funny. So when I was thinking about that particular question at one point, I thought about Fallout 4.
Yep.
But if I'm real honest, I did not play Fallout 4 as a role-playing game. I played it as a base-building game.
Right. Well, and you can look at it and you know, and any way you look at it, like one of the things I've always wanted to do, and this isn't role playing game, but this is that when we play live sessions of D&D, I want to build print an entire map. Instead of it being on a grid, I want it to be plastic.
3D printed.
Yes,
That would be awesome.
Right.
I'm game. Do it.
It would be fun. It would be a lot of fun. So speaking of 3D printed games or a 3D printed table or terrain or whatnot, from tactical mini mass war games to theater of the mind and the narratives, where do you currently land? I'm sure it's been different throughout, but where would you say you currently land? And if you want to talk about where you were, that would be cool as well.
So, as Guy mentioned in his, Warhammer, Warhammer 40K, Hero Clicks, games like that, they do the tactical portion, in my opinion, of how I want to play. I love D&D. It is definitely one of my favorite games, but I hate the fact that combat takes forever. When you're a player, you take an action and it might be a half an hour before you get to take another action because there's 4 other people, 5 other people that have to take their action, then all the NPCs have to take their action, and the combat system, while awesome, is just very slow moving. In that respect, I've gone more towards Theater of the Mind with Root RPG, or we've been playing Scum and Villainy, and I gotta say, I love them. I love the descriptive aspects of the game. It's not as much a roll the dice and see how, if I'm lucky enough to hit or lucky enough to crit or do a lot of damage. It's more of a, what's the story that I want to tell? What is this guy gonna do? What is this girl gonna do? What is this character gonna do? And how are they gonna adapt to this situation?
So, do you prefer Theater of the Mind over tactical combat then?
That's where I think I'm leaning towards, because I love the that you can add so much depth. I think that, to me, I love D&D. I love the lore in D&D. I love how much there is in D&D, but it's shallow in some parts as well, because it's not your story. It's a story that they wrote for you a lot of times. Right. It's their world. It's not your world. Now, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily a proponent for homebrew. I don't make my own campaigns.
You can do it.
So right now you'd be more Theater of the Mind.
Oh, definitely. I think right now, yes.
Right. And I know this is Alyn. We're interviewing Alyn here, but just to jump in, Ryan, where are you at with that right now? Because we've only recently been diving back into the Theater of the Mind, and I just wanted to get it real quick.
I have a very similar opinion to that, which Alyn just said. I think, at least, tactical combat just takes so much time. I love it. I love the rules and doing all that, but it does tend to take away from the rest of the game, and I don't appreciate that aspect of it.
Right.
D&D's my old friend, so it's hard to get away from that. But I am enjoying giving these new games a try, like Root with, and that's definitely Theater of the Mind. I'm kind of enjoying the Scum and Villainy. But it's definitely further out of my comfort zone. That's also, it's a lot of Theater of the Mind.
You need to embrace your futuristic role-playing self.
It's more, I have comfort in the security of rules, and we're getting further and further away from
the narrative does take away the safety net sometimes. Yes. I think I'm in agreement with both of you that while we all can say that we love the tactical combat, we all like the fact that when we play a narrative game, more gets done.
It's more of a story. It's not even about getting things done. It's more of that I feel like I'm taking better part in a story. I feel like I'm actually making a difference, not just, I'm going to go fight these guys. And D&D is a lot of that, unfortunately. It's a lot of, let's go from this fight to this fight to this fight, and really, if you don't do milestone leveling, that's how you level. That's the only way to level in D&D is through combat.
That's why well, if we want to take a little side note there, we didn't grow up with milestone leveling, but I really like the concept of milestone leveling because it takes the emphasis off of combat.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was the only way you ever got experience was if you had the combat. So you needed the combat.
You had to go kill a bunch of
Milestones are such... I just really like that concept.
Yeah, and just to, so as an aside, and just to stick up for D&D, because I know that we all love it and we're not trying to bash it, I will say that we still, despite how many years we've all been playing, are still growing as role players. So there are ways, jumping back several interviews now, that you can change D&D that we might implement as we go forward. So there's things that are variable combat ends. So instead of saying every combat ends when one side dies, you can have combat end when a totem is destroyed, or when you pick one person on each side and that's the person that the other side is trying to kill, or it ends when you capture somebody. So there's the concept of combat outs that we've not done a whole lot of exploring on, and I think that it's important to remember that we shouldn't beat up our past memories of things as I said, we're still growing as role players, and we're starting to try to learn to tell better stories.
And I would never diss D&D. I love D&D. I don't think there's anything bad thing about it. I think it's more of a personal preference anymore because I'm older, and it's not about finding that next item. It's not about finding that next combat, winning that next battle. It's about telling a story, like I just said. To me, that's more important than, oh, I got the Vorpal sword and I can go cut people's heads off now. Whereas...
it's funny. So, right now I'm playing in Alyn's Icewind Dale game. And I'm running a root game and a Scum and Villainy game. And I can't say definitively because I'm not playing in those two Theater of the Mind games. But in the Theater of the Mind games, I feel like I agree with you completely. It's more about the story. It's not about going to find the items. However, that being said, when I'm in Dungeons and Dragons and I know those items exist, I have a goblin. I have a goblin brain that wants the thing. So I think it can be both. I think, and we've talked about this. I think that you could run a game. In fact, I would love to run a game that is kind of like talking back to the high fantasy, low fantasy that was in Ryan's interview. I'd like to run a game that was like one step above high fantasy. Like, let's run a ridiculous fantasy game where there are magic items everywhere. Like, the idea that you could have 5 or 6 magic items and they all do neat things. It's just more stuff that you can do. So
that sounds like the stuff we used to run when we were like 12.
Yeah. And you could do it. I just think that with our current level of storytelling ability that we could make that we could harness that chaos slightly more.
Like I said, and I also said I'm moving out of my comfort zone with the basics of Root, and then even more so with the Scum and Villainy thing because it's even more loose. But I definitely appreciate it because, like you said, we're growing, and I can feel that pushing myself into that is helping me adapt because I've never really been that great at like the whole improv aspect, and it's forcing me to get a little bit better at it. So with more practice.
Yeah, I agree. What were you going to say, Alyn?
I was just going to say interview 3 where nothing keeps the format.
We've been mine was drifted a little bit off format, but yours, yes, it's become more of a
you know what
group talk.
It should have more of a round table feel, in my opinion. I dig it.
Good.
I like it when it's looser.
So I'll ask a question then. I think we asked this in a previous one. What's the coolest thing you ever did in a game?
Coolest thing, I don't know if it's the coolest thing I ever did in a game, but it's probably my favorite thing I ever did in a game. And Guy, you were with me when we went and we fought the Norse gods because I had a death wish, and so did Guy apparently, and our friend named Todd. And Todd had a friend named Neil, and Neil was a really good, real eccentric type of guy.
I was not present for this.
And we just kind of wanted Neil, honestly, to run a campaign. And at the time, I was an assassin, and I had the short sword of Kaz, which is amazing just having that. I really don't even remember the campaigns that led up to the character, but... and Guy actually had an artifact as well. He had the Axe of Dwarvish Lords, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. And we assaulted the Bastion of the Gods, the Norse gods, to be precise. And we ran into Thor and Loki, and it didn't turn out well.
And Odin.
It did not. We didn't even stand a chance. I mean, it was like... It was amazing, the storytelling aspect of it, and playing it was a lot of fun, but we died. I mean, long story short, we died. We died quickly, really, when you think about it, and not very honorably or heroically. We just died.
Right. That is something in old school D&D, because that was first edition, or maybe second edition.
It was second.
Yeah, but that was back in the that was early 90s.
Yep.
But yeah, Neil was older than us and very eccentric, and
yeah.
But yeah, that was cool. We did absolutely get the hell kicked out of us, for sure.
And I at the time I was really upset that I died because I liked that character. But
right,
looking back on it, I mean, it was just an amazing adventure.
Okay, Alyn, how do you feel about the shift from tabletop to virtual tabletop? Do you like one better than the other?
If I had to pick one, I would pick virtual. It's not about having... It's a lot easier to get everybody together to play if you go with a virtual instead of trying to get everybody in one place. Now, that being said, I mean, there's definitely a disadvantage of it, like as Guy mentioned in his interview. You know, they're talking over people and stuff, and sure, that's a problem, but at the same time, I could always pick up my phone and call somebody, or, like I do, text them.
Yeah, and interrupt my whole concept of thought during gameplay when you're texting me.
And say, hey, let's do this. Hey, what do you think about that? Hey, here's this idea. So, you know, it doesn't have to be an interrupting idea. And to me... Like I've said, anymore it's about the story. It's not about the end. It's just about hanging out with my friends and having a good time doing it. Do I want to complete an adventure? I definitely want to complete an adventure, but do I care if I do? Yes and no. I mean, no, because like it's about the journey. It's not about the end. But do I ever see us completing a D&D adventure or ever getting characters to like 20th level? No. I don't see that ever happening because... And I'm not a dungeon master, but I can see where it gets really hard because the more powerful you get, it's a lot easier to kill people and one-shot bad guys. And you think this is going to be a big fight from a dungeon master standpoint, and it's not. And somebody's dead.
So we should probably jump in here and mention that you've only started dungeon mastering recently. You've got a little bit of experience in Starfinder, and then D&D, right?
Yep.
But when
all
we say
modules.
When we say recently, we're only talking within the last 5 to 10 years.
Well, yes. With any time, and it's all actually within the last 5 years when Starfinder came out.
Okay.
Is when I started because I wanted to play. And Guy didn't want me to play with him or Dungeon Master with him, and that's who Ryan played with. So I started my own campaign with my family. No, just kidding. Picking on Guy there. But nobody wanted a Dungeon Master, so I said, well, I have the most experience. I'll Dungeon Master if you guys really want to play. And I ran Starfinder with 2 of my kids, my father-in-law, and Ryan. And that we did that for a few months. I was running modules that I really liked, and that was really my first foray back into Dungeon Mastering. And then since then, I've run Dragon Heist, which I haven't completed, that I kind of liked. I'm actually looking forward to running a narrative campaign. I think that's going to be a lot of fun and way different than D&D. And I'm running Icewind Dale for you two, as well as occasionally Steve or Alex.
So right on that string, now that you have game mastering under your belt, do you find that you have a preference towards game mastering or towards playing?
So I like telling a story. I like the nuance of it. I like the control of it. I hate the prep work of it. I hate the what are my players going to do?
We're like the
Here.
exact
You know?
opposites.
It's like I wake up and I was like, oh, we're going to do this today. I better like at least look into it before. And I make a ton of mistakes. Like at last session we played, I was like, oh, you guys got this. And you're like, no, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oops. Well, yeah, you got this from this guy. And it's definitely something I enjoy, but something that I have a lot of room to grow in. And I'm not saying that I dislike it. I actually really enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to doing it more. But I'm a person who likes to, when I have something in front of me, I have to get it done. And when I'm done with it, I'm done with it. It's done. It's over with. And that's not what game mastering. Game mastering is, well, this session we're going to have to build this. And I don't like prepping. I like to.
Right, and I don't. It sounds like you're trying to ease your way into it, but I don't think there's a wrong answer for this. By the way, just to throw that out there, I don't think there's a wrong answer. I think it's completely fine to say I prefer to play because of this.
But I don't. See, that's the thing. You know, that's I'm unsure of really where I fall still.
Yeah.
I like being in control, like I said at the beginning. I'm not a fan of the prep, though. I'm not a fan of pulling out 8 books and
speaking to what you said,
going through them.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Speaking to what you said earlier, and you're completely right that dungeon mastering or game mastering, if you're system agnostic or storytelling, it does have a lot more prep work. And to tack on to also what you said, the idea that when you are in Dungeons and Dragons, when your players get to a certain level, that's really what makes the games fizzle out, is because when you hit the teens level, from a game master perspective, it becomes a lot of work, because trying to get something challenging in front of them that doesn't immediately kill them. And there's nothing wrong with players dying. I'm sorry. There's nothing wrong with characters dying. Let's be real clear on that.
Yeah.
Alyn no longer is alive.
Slip of the tongue.
There's nothing wrong with characters dying. It's not necessarily the style of game that we've played. But I 100% agree with you that it is difficult to imagine getting to a point where you cap out a level, in D&D at least.
Okay, but we can even go back to like a question that I asked Ryan. Would I like to start a module and then the characters to go left and it turns into a homebrew? I think that might be fun, but at the same time, it's like, well, then I'd have to make all this, and do I really want to make all this? You know, would I push them back on the rails and get them back, you know, in the home, or find a way to somehow make them go back? I don't know. I don't have that experience.
I think I would feel let down by the players.
Yeah.
If they totally derailed a pre-made module. It would be just like,
see, but
really?
now then, okay, but see what you just said to me, that kind of defeats the purpose. Are you really telling a story now, or are you walking through a book?
See,
are you walking through different plots?
So like
and that's the draw.
A pre-made game like Dragonlance or Curse of Strahd or Icewind Dale, you could kind of equate that to a Pick a Path to Adventure books, which we all love when we were kids. You're on quote unquote rails, but you do have choices. Whereas if you were halfway through a Pick a Path to Adventure book and set it down and went and read a different book, there's that feeling of unfinished. And I agree with both of you. I do think that I think that the leaving the existing story makes perfect sense if you've resolved at least the main beat of the story. So like in Curse of Strahd, for example, which we finished not too long ago, if you beat Strahd, because that's the main beat of that story, and then didn't go home, if you beat Strahd and then instead we want to stay here and become the Dark Lords of this realm, that would make perfect sense. But I think to be true to the story, you need to finish the main beat. Whereas in a homebrew, unless you've all agreed that there's a main beat, there probably isn't. Because that's kind of like what Ryan was saying, is you let the players drive the story, and if the players haven't agreed on what the story is about, there is no main beat.
Which I mean, I can definitely see that, but I don't know. I guess to me, especially as a new dungeon master, I'd like to find like a happy medium where,
Sure,
the players aren't forced to make a choice. They're not forced to go in direction A. They can go in direction B, and then maybe they'll wind back around in direction A. I think, to me, it's just too. It's going to be this way or this way, And I know that's not.
To me, that's the way we always play, or we always played before doing the pre-mades.
Right, but
like with the homebrews, I would always basically let the characters build the story.
Right.
I built the world they're in. I built the background. I gave them a ton of things to go on and a ton of choices, but I ultimately let the characters choose, and then we never would reach an ending.
Right. and like I said, I don't want to make an ending. Well, I do want to get to an ending, but if we don't, and we just play. To me, it's about playing anymore. It's not about finishing something. It's like if we pick up a board game and play. We played it that night, and that was nice. It was fun. It was relaxing, and it was something that I did that wasn't my normal
And that's
work.
Cool.
And
that's cool. I just want to finish a story sometime is all.
So the Alan, what it sounds like what you're saying is, or maybe what would make sense is, and I know you frequent like the DM's Guild online, and where they sell like encounters.
Yep.
And a lot of the existing world, like from what you would say is fairly new to dungeon mastering, if you have the world already built for you, like maybe that's what you're wanting, is a little bit of framework to save you from that off hours work. So like if the Forgotten Realms is already built and Waterdeep is already established, all you really need is some adventure hooks, and
we're off to the races.
And the work's already been done for you.
To an extent, yes.
Right. And then you could. So I think that is definitely a happy medium to say, like you could. I'm sure that you could find online adventure hooks or individual one shots or even arcs. Like instead of saying here's, and I honestly do think this is a problem that some of the modules have, is they say we're going to take your character from level 1 to level 15, and that's a whole story there. But the thing is that's so much, and characters change as you play them. They might not want to do all that, but if it was something that was more comfortable for you, if you said it's just from level 1 to 2, and then see what your players want to do, and then maybe from level 3 to 4, and then see what your players want to do.
I think that whole level guide there is another thing that keeps people on the rails, is like, I know that this adventure is supposed to get me to level 11, so I know that I am currently level 5, so I have this much more of the story to go, so I need to focus on the story.
We're actually seeing that in the Dragonlance game right now. I can say that right now because one of our friends, I can tell, is building their character as if that character ends at a certain point. And that's from a mechanical perspective, right, more than a story perspective. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that does, I think you're right, that there is a harness on that, or a rail that's there.
And I'm not downplaying or being upset of the way anybody. Believe me, I want to finish things. Like I said, I don't mind that they stop, but man, we've never finished anything, and it would be awesome to finish the things. Don't get me wrong there, but at the same time, I just like the narrative. Like one shots. When was the last time any of us at this table ever ran a one-shot? Have we ever done it?
I've run one-shots, and so this is Guy. I've run one-shots for my family, and it was usually like a holiday adventure that I've run. But they are difficult. I will say this: it's not our normal format. Growing up, that's not how we did things. So trying to understand how to fit things into a one-shot is difficult.
Speaking of difficult, here's a random segue. Guy here. Thank you for listening to our third interview with Alyn. Now that you might know us slightly better, we can get to talking about all things gaming and fantasy, sci-fi, and nerdery. Stay tuned to the channel for weekly talk show releases as well as actual play tabletop role-playing games. We really appreciate your time and hope to see you again. This has been Gen XP. Thanks for listening. Catch you next week.